So no, you're a new group, and welcome inside the distillery. This building is a very historically accurate replica of Washington District. And so I say that not just because it's located where his was. Everything of importance that you see, namely the 5 stills, to my left, 3 to my right, and this copper tub here in the center, they are on top the site location of Washington. This is a direct result of a multi-year archaeological dig that Mount Vernon did between. They started that dig in 1999, and they continued the dig in the dirt for a number of years. By 2005, they had found enough evidence coming that they were satisfied, so they began to reconstruct the distillery beginning in 2005, and it was finished, first opened to the public in 2007. Washington, what does he get into the business and make a whiskey? Well, some of you might know this, or some of you might have noticed the date on the cornerstone, 1797. That is the year that Washington started making whiskey. It was near the end of his life. The idea behind it was that it was a newly hired farm manager. Washington hires a man by the name of James Anderson during his presidency. His job for Washington was to oversee his 4 working farms, which was over 3,000 acres of farmland. Again, to be his farm manager. Anderson knew a lot about whiskey. So the idea to build this was Anderson's. He's writing Washington letters recommending that he build a distillery. Simply put, Anderson sees it as a way for Washington to make less and as a way to profitable business venture, not unlike that mill you were just in. Washington doesn't say yes, but doesn't say no. I have to say that Washington, you have to remember how old he is when he leaves office. He's not a young man. He's 65 years old. He knows nothing about whiskey. So does he want to start a new business he knows nothing about at age? No. He wants to think about it. And after doing so, he is convinced that Anderson does have a good idea that building a distillery will be profitable for Washington. So in the fall of that year, 1797, that's when they break ground. The following spring, less than half a year later, his distillery is not only have they finished it, well, they are up and running. And the records indicate that first year they made about 4,900 gallons. Next year, 1799, they double the output and then some. They made well over 10,000 gallons of whiskey. Busy place Washington had in less than 2 years for them. Washington dies suddenly in December of that year. The success of his distillery, for that reason, is short-lived. But the ultimate demise of the distillery was in 1808, so it had that 10-year run. No whiskey was made after it. The building caught fire and burned in 1814. It was not an active distillery at that time. Oh. Now let's talk about whiskey. The whiskey of the day is rye whiskey. Rye is the main grain, though it is not the only grain. It's roughly about 60% rye, and there's some corn, 35% corn, and a small amount of malted barley. So, how about it? It is. What you want to do with those grains is you will be cooking them. They'll be mill mixed first. So you've cooked those grains. They'll be brought over here, and you're going to be cooking them. What are you going to be cooking in the barrels? You have some behind you there, and some over here to my right on the stone floor. These large barrels are called mash tuns. First things first, water from a well out back is going to be used to fill this copper tub. Fine. A fire beneath is going to be heating it, so it's that boiling hot water that will be cooking those grains. You will be one at a time cooking them, and they're going to use a tool called the latrate, like what I have here, to push those grains back and forth in that barrel. We use the same tools. I cannot stress enough that the first part of this process is you're just cooking the grains. One at a time. We start with the corn, then the rye, then the barley. After cooking those 3 grains, that barrel will have about 100 gallons of mash in it. The last ingredient they add is going to be yeast. So once they yeast the barrel, they'll place a lid on it and let it sit for a few days, allowing time for the yeast to do what it does, which is to say, convert the sugar to alcohol. The resulting mash, if everything goes right, is a water alcohol solution. Problem is, it's not very strong. It's less than 10% alcohol. So what they will do now is using buckets, they will transfer the mash from those groves to the stills for the second part of the process. 5 stills here. Those of you to my right, you can look at the mill still, and even those of you here, you can look at the still here. You'll see we're taking the top off. Copper pot encased in brick, firebox beneath it. First thing, take the top off, and then bucket the mash in. Once they have filled the still, they'll put the top, you can place the top back on, like you see here. They're going to connect it to this copper coil. Now that coil is called the worm because it coils and worms this way around the inside. Goes right up the back here. That's the end of that coil. Now, folks, you are ready to start the still. They'll get a fire going in the box beneath. They're after the alcohol. Obviously, they want to separate it from the water. The way they will do so is, well, alcohol boils at a much lower temperature than water. Makes the process a little easier. So you're heating that mash. The first to evaporate, to boil, evaporate, will be that alcohol. It rises up. It's going to get trapped in the top. Pressure builds. What happens? Those vapors get pushed down that coil. They have nowhere else to go. So now Washington has his alcohol. Problem is, it's still vapors and steam. So they need to cool, condense those back to liquid so that Washington can barrel have what's food. Flowing down these chutes, then and now is creek water from the head race, that which you saw in front of the mill. So the idea is fill this with cold water. That coil, the worm is completely submerged. So the cold water does a very efficient job of cooling the copper, but more importantly, the vapors trapped inside. So the alcohol is going to be flowing out, coming to the bucket. What flows out, we're missing the spigot, but spigot, this is a drain spigot. Water will be warming up during the run, so what you end up having is the cold water will be basically pushing the warm water out from the straight fire. What they are collecting is still not strong enough to sell as whiskey. They call it low wine. It's a low proof alcohol. They will simply collect that, and when they had enough, they'll fill an empty still and run it through a second time. In other words, a double it. Now Washington can sell what they are collecting. This is power. It was called back in the day common whiskey. The way Washington is selling it is by the barrel, the size you see and the size of the dope. Those barrels, that's just a way to get the whiskey from here to Alexander. In other words, it's not being aged on most vats. Once it arrives in the large port city of Alexandria, it will be sold to shoplifers, taverns. That was the process in Washington State. Today, during the off-season, Mount Vernon has 2 runs. One in March, and we will be starting our fall run in about 2 weeks' time. March and November combined, Mount Vernon makes about 1,000 gallons. They sell the historically accurate, the unaged, but they also have a 2-year straight rye and a 5-year premium aged whiskey available in the gift shops. The recipe is historically accurate. Unfortunately, the price is not. The Washington's is 80 to 90 proof. Today, what we sell, the unaged, is bottled at 86, 43% alcohol loss. The aged is 93 proof, 46.5% alcohol. For Washington, as a businessman, it made sense to sell it right away. So he's seeing his profits within 24 to 48 hours. Unlike the flour, Washington is selling that super fine flour. It's being barreled and sent over to Italy, Spain, Portugal. We were looking at months for Washington to see his profits back, and hoping the ship makes his way across and back. So here, he's got that local market, and he's tapping into it. Washington, yes, is growing the rye and the corn. However, in 1799, his distillery is making so much whiskey, he was forced to buy some grains in Alexandria and barrels as well. His coopers cannot keep up with demand.